You are now listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
Groovy. No more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Great Scott, big boy!
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I am your host, William, and joining me today will be Derek.
Hello.
And Sean.
Hello, as always.
And in this episode, we'll be talking about An American Werewolf in London, the classic film that had a sequel in the mid-90s, late 90s, American Werewolf in
97
in Paris.
With the Bush music video. That's what I remember.
Oh, they meant like a George W. Bush family member. I was like, oh.
I just remember, I feel like that movie was bigger than it was because I looked at the box office numbers and it did not do well. But the summer it came out, I remember I was like, I saw that trailer a lot, but I think I watched the music video a ton. Because I just, watch MTV in the summer, just have it on. And it was that Bush music video for some song they did.
There's nothing that really dates a movie quite like having like a musician write a song for it. Or, like we talked about Scream with Creed, wasn't it? It's like nothing dates a movie like that.
Yes,
whenever they like
3
predominantly put it, you know what I mean, in the movie as like a big... Especially if it's specifically if it's a movie of its time, or a song of its time. If it's like, American Werewolf in London, even that had like older music and
but it
makes it more timeless.
Yeah. Now. But that one also had probably better music.
Absolutely better music.
Yeah, because if you want to watch a movie that is a very, very much an element of its time or a product of its time, watch Queen of the Damned, which is the early 2000s vampire flick that has Aaliyah in it before she passed away in a plane crash. But the music was created and all done by Jonathan Davis of Korn. So it's all that new metal music. And so it's a time capsule from early 2000s.
Was it just Freak on a Leash on loop for the entire movie?
I don't know why, but I was watching some Korn music videos this week. I don't remember what led me down that path, but there was something specific, and then I just ended up going down that dark hole of going on YouTube and watching a bunch of old Korn videos. But I was a Korn fan, like middle school.
It's always kind of fun. I remember, was it Freak on a Leash that had the animated hopscotch scene?
The Todd McFarlane.
Yeah, I was saying that always reminded me of Spawn.
The cover of the album. Yeah, it did look like Todd McFarlane almost.
Yeah,
I think he did it. So,
he did.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me because animation was so similar.
Yeah.
Wasn't there an animated Spawn series on HBO or something?
Yes, actually.
Because one time he broke my arm, and then we watched it my aunt brought it over to us or something.
But just to clarify, there was like a PG-13 version and the R-rated adult version. We had the PG-13 version, which was much shorter.
Yeah, but it's just funny. I just remember I broke my, or maybe that's what it was. I had my arm broken.
Because it would have been like in 96 or 7.
Yeah, it was pretty. I just remember her bringing it over.
It's on Amazon Instant Video now, which I actually rewatched the series recently. Yeah. So I guess we can talk briefly about the things we've been watching.
But real quick, it's just one of those things where I wonder if she knew what she was bringing us. It is like...
Just like maybe parents will take their kids to see that sausage... What is that?
Sausage party.
Sausage party.
It's like... Because she was pretty timely with everything because of us, but it's just funny.
But to be fair, like they had two versions of it, and I remember this because like the VHS had green font for the one that was like safer for kids.
Yeah.
It was like PG-13. And then the one with the red font, I think, was the R-rated uncut version.
So was it like violence and nudity, or what?
Both, probably.
Yeah, there's both in language.
There's some cartoon boobs. Yeah.
And but like the entire series, it was only 3 seasons, and it was intended to be longer, but it didn't get renewed for a 4th season. But they're all on Amazon Instant Video now, so you can rewatch that show, which actually is pretty decent. I watched it in the past few weeks, and I enjoyed it.
Is Spawn its own independent like comic brand, or is it affiliated with like Marvel or DC?
No, it's not. Is it?
Tom McFarlane left and created, and then joined Image Comics or created it.
Yeah, but I know
then Spawn was like their flagship title.
Yeah, but I know like a lot of times, like even though it's like Image, like eventually they usually get bought out by a more mainstream brand. So I don't know if it was still kind of its own thing or if it was loosely related to it.
I think Image is still
its own
thing.
Because they had like that and like, was it Witchblade and some other stuff?
Witchblade was Top Cow originally. Like I was a huge Witchblade and Darkness fan. Like those are the two that I started reading kind of early on.
I just remember all the McFarlane toys too. Like,
Yeah, like he kind of
the
created
kiss figures
the
and-
renaissance of like highly articulated
I mean,
figures.
Yeah.
and you
can
said
trace-
you said Witchblade too. Like Image very much was that kind of style of like Spawn, Witchblade, like highly detailed, more adult oriented comic books that kind of they just had a grittier feel to than like your average superhero book.
you think we'll ever get a new Spawn?
Yeah, they were talking about it.
Well, we
recently.
talked about it before, I think, where Todd McFarlane wants to make a new Spawn film that's mostly where Spawn's kind of
Idris Elba.
well, he's kind of that actually wouldn't be a bad choice at all. But the Spawn movie they talked about is where Spawn's more in the background, it's kind of like the boogeyman,
Yeah.
and it's more from the perspective of the detectives, Sam and Twitch.
Yeah, I really love Sam and Twitch. When I started reading those comics, those are the guys I drew. I drew those guys more than Spawn for some reason. I just like love the way they look in those books, and I like those
So
characters.
doing a movie from the perspective of the detectives that are looking into the aftermath of his.
Can Nick Cage be one of the detectives, and then Idris Elba is Spawn? So it's kind of like Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance, but it's not
I
shitty.
don't think that
That'd be phenomenal.
Nick
Then we get a Kung Fu
Cage-
Monkey movie in the background. Yeah.
The premise of having it focus on the detectives very much sounds like the TV show version, like Gotham or something. You know what
Well,
I mean?
like even the animated series, like season 3, focused more on the detectives than Spawn, really.
yeah,
But that'd be
they were
kind of
good
a-
characters from what I remember. I remember loving them.
But that would be kind of a cool concept because we always get so much of the hero stuff now. Where it'd be kind of
Well, I
cool
think-
to see it from a.
But Todd McFarlane wants to direct the movie,
Yeah,
and since he doesn't have experience directing films, I doubt if he got it to happen, it would have much of a budget at all.
get a
Just do a
Whedon
Robert Rodriguez, Frank Miller deal. You know what I mean? Where like he's on set, like providing.
Co-directing.
Yeah, like providing. I'm sure very, very important feedback, but at the same time, you got somebody else that handles more of the nuts and bolts of
Well, I think
putting it together.
Frank Miller's movie The Spirit kind of killed the idea of comic creators making their own
Yeah,
films.
yeah. I mean that's yeah, and that's why I said that too. Obviously, having Rodriguez there was it was on his shoulders more than Frank Miller's that first Sin City. Did he didn't co-direct Sin City 2, did he? Frank Miller?
I think he did.
Did he? Okay.
But so did anybody watch anything this past week? Because all the stuff I've watched, I know like Derek and I both had watched Bojack Horseman, the Netflix series, which is awesome and hilarious, but not really horror related at
It's
all.
one of those things too, like not to talk about it very long, but you almost had to watch the season like 2 or 3 times to fully get every like independent. It's kind of like Arrested Development. Like you had to rewatch it to get.
And if you
all the
don't,
jokes.
if you've never heard of the show, it's where Will Arnett is the voice of a horse who's named Bojack Horseman, and this is a universe where horses and humans and animals all live together, and like
yeah, they're like people.
one of the characters is Mr. Peanut Butter, who's a golden retriever, and he wears like V-neck shirts, and it's like they're just animals who walk around like anthropomorphic animals that are acting like people, and like if
Animated, obviously.
Yeah.
yeah, it's animated, and then like people are owls and birds wearing like business suits just flying around, and that's just the basic idea. And once you get over that, it's more about this guy named Bojack Horseman, who was the star of a show called Horsing Around in the 90s, where he was like a single horse that had to adopt like 3 kids, so like a very like 90s-ish sitcom. And it's just about him, present day, like dealing with depression and
the fallout of Hollywood. almost.
being a former TV star from the 90s who made a lot of money and still makes money, but was on a show that wasn't highly regarded. But it's very, very funny. Has all-star guest cast. I can't talk. An all-star cast of guests.
Yeah, it really
who
does.
are on it.
Like Paul McCartney's been on it. Lisa Kudrow.
Well, it has like Stanley Tucci, J.K.
Yeah.
Simmons. This recent season had Abby Jacobson from Broad City.
Yeah, it's just funny too because a lot of times you just hear a lot of these voices and like, oh wait a minute, and you
Who
have to
is
go
this?
check.
And then you
Yeah.
go look up on IMDb, and you're like, oh,
Well, I mean, now that horror TV is kind of a big thing now, I want to see more horror animated shows. You know what I mean? Like we have a lot of great animated comedies,
Yeah.
but I want to see like some lavishly illustrated, horror comedies that are animated or something. Just because animation allows you to do so much more than real life. Obviously at a
And
much cheaper expense.
yeah,
Like,
and
it's just your
yeah.
imagination. That's it.
So,
So I would like to see somebody go hard at animated horror.
I want to
show.
see somebody take that show. Like, I don't know if any of you all have seen it, and I've only seen it out of curiosity because everybody I work with has kids. But the show The Backyardigans, it's like all these crudely animated animal things.
Just have
Like I
murder
want to
each
see
other.
that show where they just go on a murder spree and kill people. Like
Yeah, I think I've
I mean,
seen it
bananas in pajamas coming down the stairs.
Oh no,
Like,
that's
that
just
could be a slasher. Yeah.
Okay, but that's just terrifying
Yeah.
in itself. You know,
Like imagine an episode of Bananas in Pajamas where somebody peels the bananas and eats them.
it kind of sounds like what we're talking about with sausage or sausage party. Or
yeah,
whatever.
the
It
Reviews
shows
for
like-
that are very good.
Yeah, the potato and they're just cutting it up and they're all screaming.
yeah.
I heard that one of the blurbs for reviews of that, it said it makes one of the best and most recent arguments for the non-existence of God. This film apparently does. It's just like that was part of the blurb. It wasn't even like a footnote in the review. So very interested in seeing the approach of that film.
Yeah. So like I said, the I've been keeping up with Preacher. Actually, I think I had watched the episode before we podcasted last week because we're recording this on a Saturday, so the new one hasn't came out yet. But
Is Preacher loosely affiliated with a comic?
yes, it's based
is
on
a
a graphic
comic, yeah.
novel series, but thus far the season has been more of a prequel to the graphic novels than an adaptation of the ones that were released.
Yeah.
Is there much horror elements in there? I mean, obviously being a preacher, there's probably some supernatural stuff.
There's some definite gore and things in it. There
Yeah.
hasn't been any like outright horror elements yet.
Is it gorier
Do
than
you know if
CSI?
they'll go into that direction? You know, like
I haven't read the
Constantine?
comics. I don't I haven't really read
Keanu
the comics.
version?
I'm not sure exactly what it's going to get into, but I don't think it really goes too far into horror.
and last week you said maybe at this point just wait till it finishes and watch
yeah,
it
if you
all.
haven't watched any of it, it might be worth it just to wait till it hits Netflix.
I'm in that boat and I'll probably do that because I'm super interested in it.
Because I love the style of it, and a lot of the things in it. It's just moved a little bit slow and mysterious, and then but I think if you watch it all together, like in a binge, and you watch it over the course of a few days, then those elements aren't as they don't stick out as much if you're watching them all back to back.
Well, I think it's one thing. Kind of like right now, there's so many different things I want to watch. It's just like I'm flooded with it, and I don't have enough
You
time.
haven't watched Stranger Things yet?
No, I
right?
want to watch that too. Yeah, it's just like there's so much other stuff on Netflix I want to catch up on, and it's like it's overwhelming. It's like I have too many options to watch, and I also have Amazon Prime and a couple of different streaming services. So there's so much different stuff I want to watch, and just not enough
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. So, did anybody else watch anything this week?
Well, we all, us minus Derek, saw Star Trek yesterday.
Yeah, it's Star
Yeah,
Trek
it's-
Beyond.
I have not. I've seen the original remake. I have not seen the other.
It
two.
was not as a step above this Into Darkness as I was hoping it was going to be.
There's a lot of cool camera moves.
Yeah. I don't know if I've seen anything Justin Lin's directed.
He directed from Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift through Fast 6.
Didn't see any of
He
those.
directed the at least the first paintball episode of Community.
Okay.
And he what else has he done? He's done some other stuff. I think he's done some TV stuff, but the main thing was he did those Fast and Furious movies.
Yeah,
He
you
made a
know,
buttload of money, probably.
I know he's like super successful, and he did a good job with this, obviously. But there was nothing there that grabbed me that maybe made me want to gravitate towards him as a director. You know, sometimes you watch a film from a director and you're like, okay, just something about this guy or this female I really like. I'm digging into all their catalog. For me, there was nothing there that really. There wasn't really a huge stamp. It just he had some certain techniques and stuff, but there was nothing there that made me feel like it was his own identity was big enough in the film.
I think with these new Star Trek films, they've been carried pretty much by the cast because they did get a great cast for all the roles, and everybody does kind of mesh together and have rapport and chemistry. But this one too, like I've heard a lot of people say, it's more like the original series. They still are blowing stuff up and punching people. It's just that this one's more of like the old original Star Trek series where it's all like off ship, on planet mission, where they're mostly spending their time like on the planet doing things. So
Which I like that element. I like
that
element
aspect,
a lot.
but
I think another thing too. This is just something I was thinking about. Like, do you think that the general audiences lose interest in things like Star Trek because you have like a brand like Guardians of the Galaxy that is similar but way more exciting and probably better in just about every way?
Like with Star Trek, so the first one.
Now, obviously, hardcore Trekkies are going to disagree
a lot
with
of
that. but
Trekkies
just-
hate these movies too, though.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but just your general, like, if you told me I can either watch, because Guardians of the Galaxy was not a well-known property at all before it came out.
Yeah, it was very
And
obscure.
Obscure. So you just took general premise of the similar movies, and it's like, I would much rather watch the Guardians over a Star Trek movie.
Well,
And
I think
Star Trek just seems kind of
so. Star Trek is a
boring.
double-edged sword. It has built-in name recognition because it's existed since that original series in the '60s. So you have the name recognition where everyone's probably heard of Star Trek, but for a lot of the younger audience, the connotation of Star Trek is probably like, oh, that nerdy thing my dad liked. So I think you have that kind of going for it and against it. And these movies, the first movie in J.J. Abrams are much more Star Wars than Star Trek. Because Star Trek's about, exploration and the prime directive of not interfering with the planet and things like that. As opposed to the movies, like they kind of loosely hang to those things, but they end up just punching people and blowing stuff up.
Which is what more audiences probably your general audience.
So it's one of those things where if they go like the movie got a lot of hate because it had a trailer that had a Beastie Boys song and Kurt jumping something on a motorcycle. In the movie, those things both contextually make a lot more sense and aren't as brazenly Fast and Furious-ish in the movie.
Yeah, Simon Pegg came out against that trailer that kind of just had that up in front.
Yeah, because Simon Pegg was one of the co-writers. So, I enjoyed this one. I think that the main reason I enjoyed Into Darkness. I just thought that, spoiler alert, it was essentially Wrath of Khan. But the fact they tried so hard to hide it, to me, was kind of stupid.
Well, I could
that was an asset to promote it as, modern take on this thing. But
well, just being like, because I had watched the original J.J. Abrams one, and it was okay. But did nothing to me I didn't care about seeing the sequel. It didn't entice me in any way. I've never watched the second one.
Yeah.
And there's nothing there to make me like, oh, hey,
yeah,
I will go watch this.
This one isn't anything, for me, this isn't like, oh, you've got to see this one. This one, those first two ones feel like they have more weight to their story. This almost felt like a big budget B movie where it's kind of like, sometimes it's like, okay, this is a little dumb. Like when they're talking in all their specific Star Trek language, you know what I mean? Like,
well, it felt like an episode of the series expanded out into a movie.
Yeah,
was there a Iconic Cocoon discussion in it?
And it wasn't like, it didn't have a lot of weight to it, and it was just like, okay, these are just, and everything that happened in the movie was a lot of just things would happen out of coincidence or just happen just to move the plot along. It was like, oh, you just have to accept that all of a sudden they can do this thing so they can get to here, or that now this can't happen because it creates this conflict. And it was fine. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for sure as like a summer movie, but there wasn't much there to kind of want me to come back.
Maybe this makes me a weird movie watcher, but like sometimes if there's 2-3 movies in, I might go watch the newest one, and if I like it, I'll go back and watch the originals.
Well, I think
you can do that with this one.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but like, of everything I've seen in this movie, there's absolutely nothing that wants me to be like, hey, this even looks remotely interesting.
Yeah.
It just looked like to me, it's like, eh. Like, it was just nothing I saw in the trailers, and none of the actors is something where I'm like, I want to see these people do this. It's kind of like,
I mean, I really enjoyed the cast of Star Trek that they have put together, and I'd like to see them make some more movies. It's just, it's kind of one of those things where you enjoy it more than it was good.
Well, compared to this,
absolutely.
like Rogue One, which is not really tied to any of the main like already known Star Wars except for Darth Vader, that looks really awesome. And even if it's just his own standalone movie, I would want to watch it.
See, from what I know of it, it sounds good. But the trailers I've seen, they didn't get me any more interested in the Star Trek one personally. The trailers didn't do much for me with that. For that,
are you talking about Star Wars or
Star Wars?
Okay, you said Star Trek.
Yeah,
okay,
sorry.
But yeah, like I've seen that, and to me, it makes me somewhat interested in watching. Whereas like the Star Trek, it's like the white blonde alien girl, or whatever. She looks pretty cool and interesting, but outside of that, it's like
what I know about the new Star Wars is more interesting than this was. But the trailers.
But I'm just saying, like sometimes, like I said, it's just different taste too. But there's just some things you watch, like this is interesting, and you're like, no,
yeah.
Well, you have the hype machine of Disney, Marvel,
and are we
Lucasfilm
getting
versus
fatigue?
Paramount.
Are we getting big movie fatigue? Because think about it,
I think we're getting sequel fatigue.
Just big movie fatigue. Because like this year, and I know some of them are sequels, but still. You had, and some of them weren't. Yeah, Batman v Superman. I'm just going super big movies. Batman v Superman, Deadpool, Captain America, Deadpool, or not Deadpool. Sorry, X-Men Apocalypse.
But see, I think
and then you had, and I know some of it is gonna.
It's been sequel-liness has been hurting everything because
but sequels don't bother me.
You have movies like the Ninja Turtles where it came out a couple years ago. That original one will have done better than the sequel, even though the sequel got better reviews.
But my point is though, you have so many big movies. I think even if they're all original titles, it's like. Because
I
generally
think
people go to
come
five.
out. They come out once or twice, and then now they're starting to get like, okay, do I really need to go to theaters to see the six X-Men
Another thing
movie?
too is what they get is like, I've read, it was something I seen in the other day. Something about like most moviegoers see 5 movies a year. That's your average. Your average person that makes movie money or makes money for movies goes to 5 different movies. So I just named 4 movies already.
Yeah.
You know, and that was huge blockbusters. And then you have, you know, this. You have the new
We have,
Matt
like,
Damon
the
movie.
Alice in Wonderland
you
movie
have
that
Alice in Wonderland. I'm saying
bombed
if you have 5 movies to go to a year, then that's your average consumer. Before you even get to July, there was 5 huge movies.
Well, then you had the Ghostbusters reboot,
and then you get to But I'm saying before you even got to July, you had that. Well, Ghostbusters is in July, but I'm saying like I think you just get fatigued because like I remember back when we were younger. There did not feel like there was this movie.
No, yeah. I mean, it was definitely more of an event then when like a big budget film.
Like I remember Godzilla when that came out in what the 2000.
You know, a lot of summers,
98 or whatever.
A lot of summers only had one film. It was the film of the summer.
One movie. Yeah,
that doesn't happen
Well,
anymore.
I think what's happened in recent years too is that
and it's expensive to go to
there's more movies in total being made per year because it's so much cheaper and easier to make a movie. You know, which is evidenced by the fact that we made a short film recently. Like it's not a $500,000 minimum thing to make a short film. You can now start with just your cell phone. You can make a movie. So more overall movies are being made, but the studios are making fewer and fewer movies that have larger budgets. So they're either making these like one-off indie projects they buy somewhere for little to nothing, like a couple million, or they're making $100 million plus film. They're not making much in between.
The $40 million movie really doesn't exist much in studios anymore.
But I'm saying, like, if you think about it, if you're only going to watch 5 movies this year, I would have already been tapped out before a quarter of the way through the year.
Well,
you know,
or maybe a lot of people just aren't going to these movies. Though.
Yeah,
and so for me, you know, it's interesting you brought that up about like the big movies and only going to so many. Actually, the other day, I don't remember when it was, because I go to the movies every single weekend pretty much. I like to see like whatever news out, like just to see
we're kind
what
of
it
an anomaly
is.
just because we do the podcast.
I absolutely am. But and for me too, like I feel like I spend so much of the year watching like low budget horror or low budget stuff, like. I'm happy to see the big budget films because I like going to theaters and seeing like the big experiences. Like I'm all on board. Like I'm excited to go, even if I'm not super excited about the film. I'm just happy to go and watch. Like let's see a lot of money on screen. Like it's dumb, but like the movie can be good or bad. But I just want to see what they're going to do with what they're spending. Like where movies can go. And sometimes it's a waste. Sometimes it's not.
But I just think that like just me personally, like because I'm trying to think, I'm not going to count on my hand how many movies we've seen this year, but I know it's almost 10 that I've seen in theaters. And out of maybe those 10 movies, like I don't know, I'm gonna sit there and say this, I've liked more than half of them. Like I didn't particularly care too much for Lights Off or Out or On, whatever it was.
Which is getting a sequel.
I mean, it makes sense. It got a lot of money, but like then like movie like before I had watched the Purge movies, I thought they were because I had not watched them till I saw Purge. Election Year was a movie I watched. Then I went and watched the prequel to it. But
or the prior sequel,
whatever you want to call it. But anyway, well, I call it a prequel because I watched it. But anyway, I like those movies because it was like
prequel to the sequel.
Yeah, the prequel to the sequel because I watched.
It's a prequel because that's the order I watched it in.
Yeah, that's the order I watched it in. But it's like that's kind of like I went and watched that movie. I don't even know where I was going with this, other than like most of the movies I've watched in theaters this year, I've enjoyed.
Well, I think they've stretched
Suicide
a lot.
Squad too is coming.
Yeah, that Suicide Squad is a movie.
There's been a lot of properties that have been stretched to the breaking point, and far too many sequels made, and people have to be given a compelling reason to get out and to shell out money for it, versus waiting for it to hit Netflix or some streaming service or just.
I'm glad Sean brought up Suicide Squad because the way they've marketed this movie. They have spent a shit ton of money. I mean, if I get on Instagram, Facebook,
well, they're trying to say, "Hey, look, people,
it's just like Deadpool. It's the anti-superhero, superhero movie."
But they're like, "Hey, people, this is a fun movie.
Yeah.
This movie's fun.
Yeah.
In case you didn't know it, the movie is fun.
I will say this.
Here's a joke. It's fun.
Yeah, but like it's worked because I'm incredibly
the public perception
interested to watch it.
Because
and you got Will Smith. Like as much as Will Smith has done stuff they haven't liked lately. I'm from the 90s.
I want to see
Will Smith.
I loved Will Smith since I was 5.
Yeah, I'm saying like Will Smith was a guy that we've all grown up watching, and he's never done a role quite like this in the superhero world. So I've really just Will Smith being Will Smith again in it makes me want.
I want him to start doing that thing where he does a song for every movie he's in.
Oh, he did on Jimmy Fallon the other day. He's
Suicide Squad.
He did
Batman's
Miami.
coming in, Joker.
But it's just funny because like. not to bring in Jimmy Fallon, he just did an entrance on it, and then he did 4 more entrances where he rode in a horse, and then he did a bunch. But just like it's fun to me to see people like Will Smith kind of go back to being what made them so great when we were growing up.
It's just,
Did you see the? Did you see the? I only saw the clip of him and Jimmy Fallon, and he was talking about like, oh yeah, of course I've done a lot of movies, and ain't no big deal. I was like on set, like, oh yeah, I'm doing another movie. He's like, but then when the Batmobile rolled around the corner, he was like, I freaked out like a little kid. He's like, and then Ben Affleck popped out as Batman, and I was like, can I have your autograph?
Yeah. But I just look at movies like that, and like, and we use Civil War for example, like they get you excited and they make you really want to go watch something. And, hopefully Suicide Squad's good because I feel like that will be, first, it'll be good for DC because every movie they made is like, you want to start doing heroin and go to an AA meeting after you watch it because it's so depressing, But, yeah, it's just like you watch out and you're like, man, the world is, what does it even mean? But
the success of The Dark Knight doomed their movies for the next few years because they all tried to replicate that feeling.
Yeah. But then
that is true.
But then you have, like, Wonder Woman, and that looks like it's gonna be really awesome, and I'm really excited for it. Yeah, like when they first picked her, I was like, and then you see her on the screen, and it's like,
go back and watch her in Fast 5 and 6.
But anyway, like when they first picked her, I was like, and then you see her on screen, it's like, okay, I'm sold.
Man, when she comes in on the Batman vs Superman, like
it's the best.
That whole movie is like worth watching for that point alone. You're like, hell yeah!
It's funny
because the theater screamed when she came on screen.
I don't know if they like tried to make Superman a part of that movie, but I feel like the worst, most unlikable parts of the movie is him. Don't even bring Superman back. Nobody likes Superman.
All right, so we can move away from the comic stuff.
We're getting into it. Anyway, that's what I'm saying, but that's like they dominate the movies right
now. But the only movies that consistently get made at low budget points or medium budget points are horror films.
Yeah.
Which is
like Lights Out. While particular, I thought it was a poop fest. I'm glad that guy got an opportunity to do it, and I hope that they continue to do stuff like that.
I read some interviews that he's done like after the movie's release, kind of addressing some of the criticisms that we pointed out in the spoilers. Well, calm down. Cool your jets. But I'm just saying, like, some of the stuff that, like, story-wise, people point to is, like, is the point of this movie really that to solve the problems are right, you just do X?
No, absolutely, because it takes me. It's like, oh, I conveniently found this. It's they've said they're making a sequel that will address the first film.
Wait, what movie are we talking about?
Lights Out.
Oh,
the sequel will pick up after the first one.
To me, too, and a director comes out and does that, it means he has a pee butt, and you need to let those criticisms grow off of you go on and make another movie.
If somebody says, hey, we can interview with you to clarify some points, that's not a bad thing.
No, but to me, don't Donald Trump it and start saying, well, I'm going to, don't do that.
Well, it wasn't like he was on Twitter saying, all the people pointing out problems of movies.
I got 2 words
for you. Punch them in the face.
Yeah, I'm going to punch them so hard their head's going to spin.
He didn't just tweet like,
you know who does that? Goes after critics is Kevin Smith. He's like the only filmmaker I know that kind of goes after.
But I just think, like I said, I'm glad that movie was made. I didn't like it, but that's fine.
But the guy went
real quick too. So big budget movies and horror. We talk about low budget stuff. Horror movies are made on low budgets, and that's typically what the most types of movies that are made at that amount. Because even they make like big romantic comedies or dramas that are high budget. Horror films, they don't. I feel like horror films, aside from the effects, like. You can go supernatural horror, but you almost have to keep it grounded in reality to give somebody a reference point. Yeah. Because unless it has like a theme like hell or something like that, like there's really, the further you get away from reality, I think the less scary anything is. And it's like I just wonder how you would do a big budget horror film that wasn't mixed with supernatural or something. Like, even hell, like I think that's supernatural. Like I don't understand.
In today's,
aside from making it look really slick, like. That'd be interesting to come up with a concept for a high budget horror film that like demanded the money. But it's
the biggest budget movie that I can probably think of off the top of my head that has horror, like on IMDb, when you look at the genres, like it can be multiple genres. But the highest budget movie I can probably think of that had horror in the description is probably Prometheus from a few years ago.
Yeah.
Because you get stuff like that where it's hybrids.
Again, that's sci-fi. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Alien, phenomenal, one of my favorite films of all time. Also, Danny McBride said that,
the new Alien is scary.
From his claim, it is a horror film and it's going to scare the shit out of you. So
we'll see.
By the way, I did watch Vice Principals as well. The first 2 episodes. Did you guys watch that yet?
No.
Yes.
Did you like it, William?
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. It's Danny McBride and Jody Hill, who worked before. So it's very much that Eastbound and Down kind of crude humor that
Eastbound Down's amazing.
It's just like the worst people possible. You know what I mean? Like, but they're their school, the vice principal. Like, it's. I love
what's
the pessimism. You know what I mean? And humanity in
what's
those
the
shows.
movie where he's the karate instructor?
Foot Fist
They
Way.
also did that together.
I like when he teaches a lady. He's like, "All right, go beat him up." And then the guy with the anger, she just beats the hell out of her.
I mean,
and she's like, she's dead.
That and Eastbound and Down, like that tone, that's vice principals,
Yeah.
and it's set in a school too. So they're like first episode in, there's some dark stuff mentioned. Like what would you think about school? School shootings. Like there's some dark stuff mentioned already, and it's like they're able to go there and do it wonderfully. But I didn't watch anything else because we're going to record next week's podcast after this, which is next week's is going to be Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yeah,
because William's going to be out of town.
We're having to compress these and record 2 at once.
Yeah, I watched Tucker and Dale, and then American Werewolf in London, and then kind of worked on some other things. So I really didn't. I was gearing up for that Volumes of Blood segment I'm shooting. So go like that page, Volumes of Blood. There's first films out now, I think at Target and Best Buy and stuff.
You can buy it online.
Yeah, it's an anthology, a horror anthology film. We reviewed it on the site before I was involved with it, so you can check out that video review. But yeah, that's been taking up a lot of my time. And we did a reshoot on Hazard, or just got a couple pickups, a couple shots too earlier this week. So
Yep.
it's been a busy week.
Trying to get that to the finish line, but all right. So now we can move into our discussion of American
And
Werewolf,
full spoilers off the bat.
An American Werewolf in London from 1981.
Yeah, full spoilers, and it's on Amazon Video to watch if you have that for free.
Oh, damn it. I didn't know that because I rented it.
Yeah, so anyway, definitely watch this film first.
See, so looking, we talk about the budget stuff. So the estimated budget of this was $10 million, which in 1981 dollars is quite a bit, really.
How much did it make?
It doesn't really say.
I think 80 around, maybe.
Yeah, IMDb's got some weird, gross number in there that's different currency. But the, so this is from 1981, and kind of after the Wolfman and like those Universal type movies, this is kind of a different approach to the lore of werewolves, and directed by John Landis. So, this movie is kind of a seminal, kind of classic film for most people in horror. When you have like the AMC horror stuff, they always usually have this as like one of the movies that's included.
Yeah.
And, for good reason, because, like I said, full spoilers. So just the basic premise is that you have a couple of guys that are backpacking in Europe. You have David and Jack. They go to a bar, and then they leave.
The slaughtered lamb.
They leave the bar, and they wander out into the moors and get attacked by a werewolf, where Jack dies, and David gets attacked and gets bit, and then he becomes a werewolf. And, that's all the setup you really need.
Well, and the big point, too, is Jack the one that dies? Right?
Yes.
Yeah, and, and the big kind of, I guess, original stamp on this is that Jack continues to come back as a corpse, and kind of warn him about what's happening.
Is something
And
that I
he
love.
slowly deteriorates.
Yeah, that was the best part. Is like as you see him through the movie, like when you first see him, he's like pretty fresh. Then as the movie goes on, he's not in the movie a lot, but every other time you see him, it's been like a couple days, a couple weeks.
In the movie,
and then
I love that actor too. And
yeah,
when I first watched the film, I liked that actor so much from like just seeing him like here and there. I wanted him to be the one to carry the movie.
Yeah.
I was upset. And then, this was years back, and then when I'm like, oh, he keeps coming back. Like, I love that element to it. And apparently, John Landis wanted to make a film. This is just me reading up a little bit on it. He wanted to do a film about the undead, and he was trying to figure out the right approach to it. So it's like kind of a more unconventional approach. But I think the genesis of this film came from making a movie about undead, and this is how he approached it, which is an awesome way to make it totally, its own thing.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things about this film is something I have not seen really, is that when you become the werewolf, when you kill someone, you essentially they can't die. Like they say, undead, they're
They
in
have
another
to
world.
roam.
Purgatory, yeah.
But the thing that makes it interesting is they're able to interact with only the werewolf.
Yeah.
So when you kill someone, you like one scene in particular toward the end of the movie, like he's in a movie theater and all of his victims are talking to him, trying to get him to kill himself. And they're all giving him like suggestions of how to do it.
Yeah, I mean,
and
it's funny.
And it's just kind of like an interesting thing because like you know, the main characters in this movie, Jack, and I can't think of their guy's name. You just said David. They're both pretty likable, upbeat characters, but it's just kind of like a interesting thing to see. Like you have to carry. Well, I'm talking about them two in particular. You have to carry the guilt of what you've done. Mm-hmm. You know, like even though you can't remember the killings, you get reminded of it on a daily basis because all the people that you killed are able to follow.
Well,
you.
it's like so like the major positives in this movie, you know, it still has like the werewolf transformation scenes,
which are
those still hold up.
Rick Baker.
Those hold up to stuff today. Like I think those are better than any CGI.
That won the first Special Effects Academy Award too for that year. And apparently, so this film he wanted to make it like 10 years prior, and could never get. John Landis did. He could never get the funding for it. Then he did like Animal House and Blues Brothers and stuff, and he had cachet. And he went on to make this. Well, Rick Baker had been waiting so long that he went on to work on Joe Dante's The Howling, which came out the same year. Yeah. And then John Landis found out, was like, no, I'm making this movie now. I got the money. Come back. So Rick Baker developed special effects for The Howling, and then he left that project, and somebody took it over, and then he went to work on An American Werewolf in London. So both those films came out in the same year. Both of them were, you know, the basis of the effects were from Rick Baker. So it was just interesting how all that lined up, which I love The Howling. I need to watch it
Which
again,
I think, too, though, like, kind of William talking about the AMC's Horror Fest, like, one of the, whenever you get toward Halloween, you start watching, like, any top 100 list as far as, like, transformations or horror scenes has, where his hand's extending and he's screaming and just, like, he's in visual pain because, like, you know,
transformation. We've done a little bit of, like, original content. So I was watching this. I was reflecting, like, hey, how did they accomplish all this?
Yeah.
And, like, some of it was, like, where they obviously had, like, the actor, like, under the floor, like, for parts of where he's, like, on the floor kind of writhing and stuff, like, where they're able to do that. But then a lot of it's, like, you know, that still looks good and doesn't look fake. Like,
no, especially when his hand's extending and it looks all one continuous shot.
Yeah.
If there were cuts in it, they were very well hidden and it looked very good.
I think the face scene... I think that's what the scene they're talking about. Rick Baker, I guess, worked like 8 months on that.
Yeah,
and he was mad at John Landis because it only used it for a few seconds. Like he was really mad. But then when he saw like everybody like clapped in the theaters when they show that scene, he's like, okay, it was worth it. You know what I mean? Like it was, and it mattered, and it's mattered because all the way up today, like you said, like there's not really any other transformation scenes that are as good as this. There's some like interesting takes on them since then, but it's almost like Jaws and Psycho, like. Now that this werewolf movie, you know, exists, like it's really hard to do one again and have a transformation scene that is a core part of it because you're always going to think of this movie. Like if you're going to do a werewolf movie, you know, you got to have a different spin on it.
Just take the approach of like the MTV series like Teen Wolf or Twilight. Just get some really hot people to turn into werewolves.
One thing too I wanted to talk I like about this movie is like although there's not a ton of character development. Each character they have like the nurse and the two main like you and the doctor, you know, there's not like you don't know much about them. You like them, like they feel like real people.
So the movie gives you like this, you know, existential question. So like if you were bitten by a werewolf and you were going to turn into one every time there's a full moon and kill someone, would you then kill yourself before anyone else died? Or would you try to just deal with it? Like, I think most people would not want to kill themselves right off the bat. And, you know, you could try to be more proactive. Like, the thing, too, is, like, do you believe that that's real?
Yeah.
Like, so first off, you have to believe that it's real. And then it's like, what would you do? Like, chain yourself to, like, in a cellar or something? Like, that might work. That's what they do in other literature and TV series and stuff. But... you know, it's also a guy who's backpacking through Europe and doesn't have, like, his own house and everything. And, of course, no one's ever going to believe he's a werewolf until it actually happens.
Yeah.
And, like I said, so, like, the transformation effects are spectacular still. And I think if you show that to, like, a younger kid today, they would still hold up.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about that.
But the only thing in the movie that I think that doesn't quite hold up as well is the last sequence that's actually in London, where it's, like, full werewolf running around. Yeah. Like, that stuff is a little bit...
but at least
it's a practical effect of like a creature running around, and when they use it, like when you see it more of it, when you see like wider shots of it running or something, it's like, oh, okay, so that's where it's aged a little bit.
But at least it's not CGI shittily.
Well, no, it's
Like
not.
American Werewolf in London.
Yeah, or Paris.
I mean,
It's not terrible CGI. It's still like a practical thing.
Like, I'll take the shittiest practical effect any day over subpar CGI.
Oh yeah, like,
even good CGI.
like werewolf, like Van Helsing. I don't know if there's a. I think there was a werewolf in that. Like if you watch something like that is tough to watch now.
One thing too, I liked
Hugh Jackman film.
One thing too, I liked about the interpretation of this movie. I had to watch The Howling because it's been a long time since I've seen that one.
Yeah, me too.
But like this one, I like it because like it just literally like a wolf. It wasn't like a wolf man. It's just you literally turn into a wolf, and I think that makes it. I like that a little bit better because, like, you know, the old Universal, it just kind of looks like a Chewbacca type guy running
apparently,
around.
Rick Baker and John Landis had heated arguments over that, where John Landis wanted to be. He said, "I want it to be more like a hound of hell, like an animal," and Rick Baker wanted the upright one. I guess from the classical, Wolfman and stuff. But I think it was the right decision too because there was just so many elements to this film that kind of give it its own spin.
Well, and it sets it apart.
Yeah, it's.
But one thing too, I kind of liked from the beginning, like both of the way the characters interact, Jack and I keep forgetting David. Like you feel like those are real people, like just the way their conversations go and the way they interact.
Yeah,
and like when he shows up later, like it always kind of reminds me of the Pet Cemetery scene a little bit from where like the guy he tries to rescue dies on the table and he kind of comes back as like, and maybe they drew some inspiration from this, but like Jack is like, you're going to turn into a werewolf. You need to kill yourself, end it. And he's like, I can't die until you're dead. And
it's like the best. I mean, it's one of the best ways to give exposition or something. You know what I mean? Like it's the most interesting way to translate this information because it is also about, the person saying it is almost like a plea for help. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's like
but he wasn't,
such an interesting way to handle all that.
And the two, though, like he wasn't like tormenting me. He's like, because at one part,
funny, and he's kind of beat the whole time.
He said, "That's my friend. Take it easy."
Well, in the theater, all the people are like, "You need to kill yourself." Blah blah. And he's like, "Well, this is my friend. Take it easy." But at that point in time, he had decomposed so much that it was just like almost skeletal. Which I thought was kind of interesting too. Which is why I like this movie because I feel like if they ever remade it, it would obviously be terribly done CGI.
To me, like if you think about this movie, ultimately the villains in the movie were the people at the slaughtered lamb.
Yeah,
because
really.
If they had simply told they left, they said you're essentially giving them a death sentence, and nobody did anything. So if they had just been upfront about it, then they would have never gotten attacked. There would still been a werewolf out there, but it was just roaming the moors and all that stuff. So them allowing these two tourists to go out and knowingly essentially sign their death warrant, they were kind of the villains, really, because David and Jack, like they were just good-natured guys. And then if somebody told you that you were a werewolf, you would probably you'd have to see it to believe it.
It almost feels like, and that element of it too was just like another part that I love. It almost felt like in the lineage of something like Straw Dogs, where it's like this like quaint little town, you know what I mean, in the countryside of England, but also there's like a dark side to it, just like like Hot Fuzz more recently, you know what I mean, where it's like but no, we've got to keep this contained,
or
like,
everything that David Lynch makes, where it's like small quaint area has deep underbelly.
but set in England, obviously.
One thing I thought was funny too is these I can't remember what the Stockland Yard cops or what was that what they're called. It's like the elite police, the stockyard, whatever they're called. Anyway, those detectives are supposed to be like the best. And they're kind of really goofy. Like the guy comes in,
David tries to get arrested and stuff.
Not
that's earlier in the movie.
Yeah, but that's just the regular police force. I'm talking about the two.
He shuts the door on the one guy.
Yeah. I'm talking about the two detectives. Like they come in there and he drops all the bedpans. And he's like in the floor trying to put them all together, and they're asking all these ridiculous questions. And if you notice, his tie is like up here, and the bottom's like hanging down. So they're not very well put together, and they're supposed to be like you would assume the best.
They're Keystone cops, really,
and they're just not very good. And then at one point in time, the older one that's bald gets his head ripped off by the werewolf.
Another thing too about that sequence at the end. I mean, he's talking about the police. It reminded me of the sequence at the end of Piccadilly Circus. With the car crash and everything,
which is really ridiculous. Which I love.
I love it because it's like that's like the most. I guess horrifying element of the movie because it's like, oh, this is real. Like, bad car accidents are happening. It's a reality of everybody.
People are flying out of windshields. I mean, like getting run over.
It's a really bad scene when it's like anybody could die. Like, anybody could be in that accident. And you can kind of put yourself in that position, or any of your family members or anything. But that segment apparently they didn't have a permit to shoot there, and John Landis he rented out a theater and. Brought a lot of the police in from the area to watch Animal House as a free screening. He said, and basically, because he had heard like, hey, if you just if you get the police on your side, and if they kind of say it's okay, then you can do it. And so they were shutting down the street at like 2 minutes at a time from like 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. and it would just be 2 minutes blocked. They would stop traffic for 2 minutes and then shoot some of it, and they have to clean it up and move it. And apparently they had like built a replica of Piccadilly Circus and continue to like train basically, and they would do the wreck and clean it up, and almost like a pit crew, like a NASCAR pit crew, and would do it, and and then they clean it up, and like they had been so well orchestrated, that's how they were able to pull that off, which is like incredible, you know, like the work that went into that, and it totally was worth it.
One thing too, I want to say, I'm usually the one that brings this up. A lot of times movies are boring when they're from like, because Halloween, like honest to God, it's a boring movie for most of the part.
Well, you don't really care too much about any of the characters.
Yeah,
and this is
but we're in this one like
to be more fun. Instead of using the word boring, you can say it has slow moving plot development.
no, it's just boring. But now this movie,
Use your vocabulary, sir.
like no, I'm just saying, like I'm gonna be honest.
Use your vocabulary.
Like I feel like this movie has enough that there's parts that kind of lag a little bit, but like you have really entertaining parts too. Like after his first night being a werewolf, he wakes up nude in the wolf cage at the zoo. So he's like leaving the zoo, and at one point in time, there's like a little kid.
He's like, I'm a balloon thief.
Yeah, he's like, I'm a balloon thief. Come to the bush, and the kid's like, well, you're a balloon thief. Why do you ask me money? And he takes a balloon and runs off.
Yeah.
And then like he's running through, and like he shows him run naked, and takes his lady's coat, and then he's at a train station, and it shows like all these different shoes. It's like it's enjoyable, and it made the character seem a little more like real.
Yeah, I mean, story-wise and a lot of the scenes, like they cut a lot of fat out of this. Like it moves really well. And you were talking about the characters being likable. Apparently they shot it in sequential order, which normally they don't do. They shot the beginning first. And it almost felt like that. It almost felt more alive, almost like a Richard Linklater film where, you know, like Dazed and Confused or something like that, or Everybody Wants Some, where the characters felt so real because you felt like you were kind of, I guess because it's from a comedy director, like
I think having comedy chops.
Yeah, I think that's
There's so much more reality, and that reality helps sell the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
And like typically when I see certain horror films, you know, I don't think that this is particularly scary at all.
No, I don't either.
Yeah.
But it has a tone about it that kind of, it almost like a campfire story where it's like, oh yeah, this isn't real, but like they take the horror and the lore and everything very seriously, but at the same time the movie has a different tone about it to where it doesn't feel self-serious. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but it respects what it's doing at the same time.
Well, like,
it just makes it work so much better than something that feels like it was very pretentious or something like that.
Yeah, and
know?
then, like one other scene I love too is like toward the end, he sees Jack again, and this is when he's like really decomposed, and he goes into a theater, and it's a porn theater, and the movie they're watching, like there's a guy and a girl getting on, and then this big muscular guy comes in, he's like, hey, I told you not to do this ever again. And he's like, I don't know who you are. And the girl's like, who are you? He's like, oh, I'm sorry. And just leaves the room. And it's like, what? Like, and they just go back to doing whatever. And I just really enjoy that because I don't know if that's something they
and then he's like, good movie.
Yeah. And it's just like, I don't know if that's something they shot just for this movie.
I think they shot it before the first thing they shot.
It's just funny to me that's like, he's just like, okay, and then leaves.
This movie coming from somebody that, you know, has like a track record in comedy and things like that. Like, I think if you had made this movie as an exploitation style film, then I think it would have kind of just fallen flat. But the fact that they kind of infused it with a little bit of humor, like every now and then, and characters that you could identify with and that weren't really bad people. Yeah. Because that's a problem with like a lot of movies is everybody's just a terrible everybody's just a terrible person in a lot of these movies.
Like the doctor would have been somehow trying to exploit the Wolfman for some reason, but in this one he was just genuinely trying to help or find out what's going on.
Yeah,
you know?
So, you know, you have all the elements in it that make it an enjoyable watch. Like I said, I think that like I was trying to figure out, it's like, okay, so if you showed this to young people today, I guess we need to start doing that. Like I said, it's really creepy to be like, hey, can I get like some 16-year-olds come over or 17 like, so it's rated R?
I feel like you could keep them. I feel like if you showed them this and something else from that era, you know, like you just go to Halloween or Friday the 13th movie or something like that. I think this is an easier watch because it moves like a lot. Friday the 13th is not as bad, but like Halloween does have a significant part of the movie where there's like.
Well, I think that part of the problem with like watching older
and this probably had a better budget too. I think that's one reason.
Far larger budget. I think part of the problem too is in older films like Halloween or
like Psycho
or the original Friday the 13th is that they set a blueprint that movies followed and amped up over time. Yeah. So now,
but this came out like 3 years after.
The point that I was trying to make though was so like with the slasher films and things like that. If you don't have a boob every 2 minutes and somebody getting their head cut off, people get bored. Yeah. As opposed to werewolf films, I don't feel like I've ever really progressed beyond what An American Werewolf in London did. I feel like they've done different takes on the werewolf lore and things like that. Yeah. I don't think any movie you know, they had like the Universal remake a few years ago,
Which Rick Baker did the makeup for that too.
and it was directed by Joe Johnston, and then kind of dropped, and like multiple people tried to direct it or something. Like it was a mess in terms of how it got made. But you have stuff like that where it's like the old timey like Wolfman type stuff.
Old timey.
So like in terms of werewolves, I think that they've been touched on more like instead of their own genre, it's been more in other things or in exploitation style films. Where like I said, I think
Like
you know,
Wolf Cop.
yeah, stuff that's like an exploitation style movie with the werewolf. You know, that's not really going to exceed what American Werewolf in London did. It's just kind of a different take on it. So I don't think anybody's ever really went out and made a movie that was in that ilk that amped it up so much and made it where it's hard to go back and watch this older film like they've done in some other genres. Like I said, you know, there's a lot of things that have had werewolves in them. Like I said, Twilight had it, and crappy stuff like Van Helsing and
but they just kind of one thing too,
True Blood and all these things, and
Underworld or whatever.
yeah, Underworld, and so like those, even like the Underworld films are like exploitation, like B action movies. Like I don't think anything has real like you had American Wolf in Paris, which wasn't good, which you know was a very much a product of its time, and like you said, it had like music video stuff in it, and
just they made money off of this one, so
I don't feel like I don't feel like the werewolf genre has been played in the same way and had like people amp it up while still making quality films to get people to like have a hard time watching this one. So I think it might be an easier watch for a younger audience than some of these other films.
Yeah,
where they, you know, Halloween H2O might be more palatable for a current young person than the original, just because they amped up the action a little bit.
Yeah.
Even though I'd argue that it
now
aged
for a young
poorly.
person, that's going to seem really dated based on some of the music in that.
But I just like look at this movie, and it's like a lot of times when we watch these older, like Exorcist was one that I didn't get bored during rewatching. But there's a lot of times we watch these older movies, and being a person who has like ADHD, I get bored.
Well, and
it's hard.
A
to
lot of
keep
times
my
they're
attention.
paced differently. They were meant to play out.
But this movie was paced like now that you talk about like John Landis, I didn't even think about that or look into who directed it. It does feel more like a comedy the way that it's set up. Maybe not exactly like it, but I can definitely tell.
You're entertained in the smaller moments.
Yeah.
So you're not waiting for the gore scene or the horror.
Yeah,
You're like you aren't plotting through the plot just to like, okay, I want to see Michael Myers kill somebody.
Yeah.
No, you're enjoying all
like
of
you
this.
didn't want him to turn to the Wolfman and go kill people. Like that wasn't
How
like.
often does that happen?
Because like in this one, I kind of liked the way they played it because you kind of felt sympathetic for the guy somewhat because like you knew ultimately like it was not going to end good for him.
He's not controlling his actions as the wolf.
Yeah,
it's kind of just completely like doesn't remember what happened.
And like with the female character, the nurse that he gets with, like you can tell they like each other, and like he doesn't want to have anything to happen to her, so he flees. But it's like one of the last parts of the movie is like he's running a rampage in the city. They get the police force out there and they get him backed up into like a alley with no way to get out. So the female lead gets out there and she tries to talk to the wolf, and he goes to attack her, and they shoot and kill him.
Yeah,
but in this movie, like the way that it happened, there was really no other way it was going to turn out, because I felt like if it turned out where they went and found some, like some box magically, like, oh, look at all these medical workers, we'll go back and train this.
And
it didn't happen.
He said too. He said this isn't like this isn't just a straight comedy or whatever. He said, this is a tragedy. It's a tragedy from the beginning almost. Like, bad things continue happening to these characters. And there's really like, there's not a happy ending to this because it can't end any other way.
And like Williams says, like the real villains of the movie are the guys from the bar, because if they had just killed him originally, knowing what they knew, then he would never even done this.
Yeah,
because of their actions.
If they had originally tried to hunt down and kill the werewolf or get the authorities involved,
or not let them
then
go out,
warned the tourists like, hey, instead of just saying stay on the main road, don't go in the moors, if they had simply said, hey, you don't have to say there's a werewolf, to say there's a huge wolf that's actually killed some people, so it's not a very good idea to be walking alone. Like that alone, but then you have no movie. So obviously they're not going to do that.
But I understand that, but I'm saying, but like you can, like I said, like the guy who got the backpackers, they had not done anything wrong. They were not bad people. You never felt like,
and then like
they never did. There's not anything in the movie where I watch where I was like, this guy's a piece of shit.
Well, when they first,
you're not watching Hostel thinking like, I'm ready for these people to die.
When they first got attacked, David kind of runs away, but then he starts to go back.
And he's like, oh damn it.
But
in all fairness, even if he had stayed,
if he had just stayed, he would have probably been just easily killed as well.
Yeah,
and so and humans react in ways where they
it was like
flee
it was a thing of instant moment of terror, and he as soon as he gathered his thoughts, he turned back for his friend. You can tell they cared for each other.
Yeah.
They weren't shitty.
And then even in his death, the friend never held it against him. That was. Yeah.
So this is the movie that I think
because his friend actually, you'd argue, got off easier having died than having become the wolf person and kill people. So.
Yeah, and so the movie I think is kind of like a goalpost for types of horror, because I think that it's generally well liked by most people. It has special effects that were hailed at the time, and it wasn't seen as just like kind of cheap throwaway entertainment in the way that a lot of horror was during its initial release. So I think that, this is kind of like a goalpost for kind of like creature features, but it's not a creature feature in the exploitation sense where it's like you said, like Wolf Cop or somebody just, not that there's anything wrong with those. It's just a different type of film. So, this is a movie that I think has stood up over time well. It's because it's, overall a compelling movie that has great effects. It's not the effects driving everything, which happens in a lot of movies.
I just think, too, though, like even the parts of the movie where the werewolf wasn't in was still fun to watch. And like, cause he calls his parents from a phone booth. Yeah. Then he's like, his sister answers, and he's telling his sister that he loves her. And then, like, as soon as he gets off the phone, he goes to try and kill himself, and he just can't do it.
It's just a really well written script.
Because like, I think most people in that situation probably have a really hard time killing them. Like you were saying, like, do you even know if this is going on? Could you really? The biggest plot hole, I guess, that I have in the movie is that Jack invites him to the theater and then keeps him in there till he transforms into a wolf, essentially. But so that's like the one plot thing.
And the stuff they're telling him to do to kill himself, he didn't have any of those tools or instruments or a gun or anything in the theater. And so it would make more sense to them trying to get him to either lock himself up or to kill himself.
They did tell him to jump in front of a car, though.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Phenomenal film, John Landis. I wished he would have continued to create this sort of output, you know what I mean, throughout his career, like this type of film. As far as like, I feel like the only person that could almost tackle like maybe a new werewolf film that would, it's not an exploitation film. Some people went into it thinking it was a comedy because it's from John Landis, and they walked out when they realized, oh no, this isn't just a straight comedy. Like
why is the werewolf killing people?
He blends things so well, and it's not like he's like doing it intentionally. It's like because it's kind of light, it helps. It helps you kind of get into the movie more. But at the same time, again, like the characters, I feel like Edgar Wright could almost update a werewolf movie because the way he handled Shaun of the Dead and what he did for zombie films was kind of the same tone where that was more comedy, but man, he respected the genre. You know what I mean? It made it fresh, but it wasn't like Cabin in the Woods or Scream where you're like being very, you're very obviously subverting things or making a commentary.
He made an entry into the genre while at the same time acknowledging what's come before.
But I would say like,
that kind of approach could the only way to be able to top this film or even come close to it.
I think the thing that I like the most about this is a lot of times we watch horror movies and you're like, why would these people do this? And like the doctor, everything in the movie kind of made sense to me. I didn't feel like, and two, a lot of times you watch these movies and they're supposed to be buddies, and it's like the dialogue's really just shitty, and it's like, I've had friends, this is not how real people talk. Like in this movie, I felt like everybody kind of talked like they would realistically with their friends, like Jack and him.
Well, I almost felt like that was good while they shot it in sequential order because it's like you felt like their relationships were developing realistically.
Yeah, and it never, and like him with the nurse, like it didn't, the only awkward part was like the love scene. Like that was kind of awkward. But like outside of that, like you could probably see where two people, I don't know if it was like the Stockholm Syndrome because that's different, but it's kind of like, she fell for somebody. It was just kind of like
the Nightingale effect, like you fall for your patient.
Yeah, so you can kind of see that going forward a little bit, and
how ethical was it for a nurse to start dating her patient?
Just once it was released, it was a fair game.
Who cares?
But yeah, I mean it's.
Like,
what's funny was
and the doctor didn't really seem to care.
Another thing too, you're talking about like everybody kind of seems like real characters and stuff. I like that he tells her like, oh, I'm having these, I'm having these hallucinations, what he thinks is hallucinations. It's not a film where the characters are keeping something from somebody and you're like, just tell them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he actually told her.
And then when the doctor comes back, he has a rational reason for thinking that David is dangerous because he doesn't say, when he says, "Oh, I talked to the people," if they believe there's a werewolf and he thinks he was attacked by a werewolf, who's to say he doesn't say who's to say he's not a werewolf. He says who's to say he might not be in the mental state where he thinks he is and he may harm himself or other people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it was all like so like those moments you would normally see in a film where they would just say he might be. I think he's a werewolf. You'd be like, okay, well he's got to do that because they
So
go after him. Like everything was just done so
Yeah, it
well.
made
The doctor wasn't the mayor from Jaws.
Yeah, yeah.
But I say like a lot of times in these movies, like the doctor would be the bad guy, like werewolf, bum bum bum,
Or
and then
not
like
believe
the
him, or you know what I mean? Like he really cared.
Yeah.
Like
Or like the next scene, like for some reason he's like sticking people with the werewolf needles, and everybody's waiting. It's like no,
I think
you know.
everybody did everything they could to kind of like figure things out at least, you know,
Yeah.
and kind of
in a rational
but
way.
again, it was a tragedy because it wasn't like people were against him.
Yeah.
Everybody was trying to help him and figure things out,
Yeah.
and it just that's what
It's
it
just
came
if somebody
to.
came up and told you that they were a werewolf, you'd be like, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like even the point,
where's
like,
your medication?
Yeah, I think something too maybe is a little bit different in this day and age, but like in that point in time, he ran up to the cop and he's like trying to get arrested, and then the cop's like, "I just go away."
Oh boy! So if you showed that scene to the current like Black Lives Matter group in the U.S. and been like, "Oh, you can go up and antagonize a cop," and they'll just let you go, they'd be like, "What? That's not possible."
Well, you know, that's over there.
Yeah,
that's also in Europe.
I think in anywhere today, though, there's just the perception between like the public and the police. Like, I don't think you could get away with that now, really.
Yeah.
In any place.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but this is also in the '80s.
And it was a comedy.
Yeah.
Or it was a comedic sequence, and it just and two, just like maybe if you're kind of acting crazy, they would just be like, "Yeah, right."
Well, and she said too, his friend just died. You know what I mean? He had
Yeah.
somebody with him.
Well, one thing too, I know we kind of talked about this anyway, but it was just really funny. Like when this is going way back when he stole the balloons from the little kid. The boy walks up to his mom and is like, "I just had a naked American man steal my balloons." It's like really dry, and the mom's just like, "What?"
Mommy, an American naked man stole my balloons.
Oh, and then he runs into the older woman that's walking through the zoo, and he's just like, "Hey."
Yeah.
And he's like fully naked, and she just kind of like, "What?"
Yeah, so I think I think we just all really enjoyed this movie, this film.
Yeah, luckily I'm not such a pessimist this week because like I felt like I was negative Nancy last week.
It's nice to go from stuff where everybody's like, to,
Well,
like,
no, everybody
okay.
wasn't. It was just specific.
Well, it's good to
Yeah.
have different opinions, but
Yeah.
you watch something like this, then it's hard to.
It's like with Lights Out, not to go too far back into that, but that's a movie that I think that even if you enjoyed it, it's not really like a tent pole, like
No, there's nothing new
stake in
in
the
it.
ground that
Yeah.
sets a level.
It
I think
was
it's
just
it's
a
an effect.
movie.
It's an effective execution of a concept, or you could argue if it's effective or not. But it generally got good reviews. People enjoyed it and made money, but it really wasn't like a new bar
But
for
like this,
anything.
in 10, 20 years from now, it will not even be in a top 100 list.
Oh, so what's funny was too. I was just briefly reading like the way they got the effect for the short film of the appearing and disappearing was simply having the camera on a tripod and turning it on and off.
Well, yeah. What did you think they did?
Well,
you think you think the version's like shirt? Ran up.
I thought they had locked down all the shots and like
And then just turn it off and on. I was like, well, maybe they could do some like cool compositing effects or
no, I
something.
didn't think
But
so, yeah.
I was like, no, for a short film, that's too
because
much
it never
work.
moved. It wasn't like you know what I mean. They weren't like walking down a hallway when it was happening.
I mean, that does not surprise me at all. It is.
But like, it's funny that like that's been such a huge thing. It's just like set on a tripod, push the button, push the button.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think is gonna be like an Austin Powers moment where they turn the lights off and you see it like run through the darkness, and then turn back on and stop? It's like, no, that's not how they did it.
Well, I mean,
It'd be
like-
so goofy.
I mean, I was like, I didn't even think. I was just like, I didn't really thought about how they did it, and I was like, well, maybe they're doing like some like compositing stuff, but maybe
Thinking
for the
too
film,
hard.
maybe for the final film, they did stuff like
No,
that.
I feel honestly like they're like, all right, guys, camera's off, run up there, and the person in the suit like runs up, and then they, all right, it's back on, and they,
Or you could do something, the way you could achieve that, like even on a short film, is if you have a motorized tripod head or something that repeated the move. You know what I mean? You could repeat the move once without somebody and then turn it on, turn the lights on, do it
Yeah.
again, and then just like cut halfway through that shot and put them over each other.
Yeah, yeah. So back to American Werewolf in London. So, was there any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
I think at some point we need to watch American Werewolf in Paris.
Yeah.
Because I've never seen that.
I've seen that.
I don't think
I
I've
saw
ever
that.
seen it.
I saw that when it came out because it used to have it on USA a lot.
Yeah.
And it had like a very 90s cast.
I think actually maybe I did see a little bit on TV, but same with this. I used to watch this on TV like bits and pieces when I was younger.
think
and then I first watched this like maybe 10 years ago.
So I think the friend on American Werewolf in Paris was the guy from Cabin Fever, if I remember correctly.
I think you may be right because I
James-
just watched that. I just watched the Bush music video because I was like feeling nostalgic.
I don't know
Like,
why every time we say Bush, I just think of like the Bushes, like George W. He is not in horror movies.
Yeah, it's George W. Bush is not many horror films, but
Not yet, anyway. He could be in one eventually. I don't know. Anything can happen.
But yeah. So I think unless there's any final comments, all of us enjoyed it quite a bit. I know, like we recently, I like been kind of talking like, oh, what rating we would give it. Like when you talk about these classics, it's kind of hard to accurately give it a rating.
But
And two, like, you know, my thing is like
because things change, and you know,
if you're giving a rating out of 10, I don't think I'm ever going to give anything a 10. I just don't think.
Yeah, I mean,
A 9.5 is about as high as I think I'll ever go.
Yeah, if I had to give this a rating, like I thoroughly enjoyed it, but then again, I've been enjoying this movie. I was the one that suggested to do it. So it's not going to be fair for me to sit there and give it a really high rating because obviously
it is. For me,
but for me, it left like a big impact. So I'm gonna give it like I'm not gonna give it a 10, but I'm gonna give it like a 9.999 because I just really enjoyed it. You know, I've always enjoyed it.
IMDb, it's kind of 7.6. The the Metascore is 60 from only 6 reviews. But
and I think Rotten Tomatoes is like a 90 something.
Yeah, Rotten Tomatoes is pretty. Yeah, it's like 80,
which is like
fair.
where it should be.
Yeah, I think like a 9 out of 10 is a fair review. Like 8.5 to 9.
I just think if you haven't seen this movie, then you may or may not be listening to the podcast for that reason. But I mean,
I think everybody's seen some.
Yeah,
of it.
It's a great movie. It's, you know, there's definitely some parts in it that are just extremely memorable. And it's funny to me, I didn't make the connection John Landis doing it. I never looked into it. But after watching it now, like, because I love the Blues Brothers. It's like one of my favorite movies of all time.
But not the Blues Brothers 2000.
No, not the Blues Brothers, the original one. But I really love the Blues Brothers, and Animal House is great. And so this movie just... I don't know. I just really loved it, and it's definitely one of my all-time favorites. You know, and it's just one of those times where a lot of times you go back and you watch these movies that you haven't seen, because I probably haven't watched this movie since.
And they had some, like David and Jack Begin. They had some sick Gore-Tex jackets.
Yes,
but the music in this is just like so awesome.
Yeah, the music is very awesome.
End of the film, like. Again, it doesn't waste its time. It just cuts, it ends, and then the music plays, and it kind of lets you remind you, oh, this is your feeling to walk away from this. This isn't supposed to be like, oh, it was so horrifying. Like, you kind of knew where it was probably going to go. It was just like, you know, it just kind of encapsulates the entire experience of this film. I just like that movie never read into itself, and it didn't take itself too seriously, but it didn't get too horrific. It just had a good balance of both. Yeah.
Like you said, the movie's over. But the only thing is they played Bad Moon Rising, which was a great song choice, just maybe odd placement in it. Because I feel like some of the music in this movie is just played because they could. Like, okay.
Well, he picked all tracks that had the word moon in
yeah. Which, oddly enough, they did not use the song A Werewolf in London, or Werewolves in London, because that song actually came out. And watch the music video for that, too. It's pretty fun. Yeah, so, it's just kind of boring, but it's kind of fun.
So, anything else before we wrap this up?
No. I mean, next week... Which in here in about 10 minutes, we're doing the Tucker and Dale podcast. So,
Tucker and Dale versus Evil, very different type of film.
Watch that film and prep. It's on Netflix.
It's been on Netflix for like 4 years. So.
I feel like the first time I watched it, maybe I rented it, but yeah, it has not left Netflix.
Because American Werewolf in London was actually on Netflix up until I decided to watch it. Yeah. So
it's still on Amazon Video.
Yeah, which I did not know if I know that.
So
I paid to
if
watch
you're
it.
enjoying the podcast, you can do us a huge favor and go out to iTunes and leave a review, because that helps us get up the podcast
we
charts.
Need them.
And
we
other
don't have
people.
any, hardly.
Yeah, we don't have very many. So go out there and leave one. That'll do us a big favor. You can also go to housebythevideostore.com to see all the content we're putting out there and find links to all of our social media accounts: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Vine, Vimeo. Find all those there. Make sure you give us a follow on Facebook, because that's where we post everything we're trying to do. Just because Facebook has kind of made themselves the most important platform versus Twitter and everything else, or even your own website. So that's probably the place to see everything we're doing most frequently.
We're putting some new pictures on there. You or Chad?
Not nude pictures, new
pictures. So there's some behind the scenes pictures from Hazard that you can go to our Facebook page.
If you want the nude pictures, you have to join our Patreon.
Yes.
.com/HBTVS. We are going to put probably some failed shots. We already have a failed effect on there.
Yeah.
Some other stuff too. So
yeah, once we're all done with that, once we get Hazard done and it's completely finished, we'll probably go back and like do a video where we kind of just go through and do like a commentary and talk about all the stuff that went wrong and pull in some of those clips. But yeah, so you can find all that at House by Video Store. The Patreon's patreon.com/HBTVS. And if you want to find the things we're doing on the internet specifically, you can find me on Twitter at Will_Droid.
You can find me on Tumblr, not Facebook, Tumblr, whatever, a bunch of stuff at Meta World Derek. I always forget when I go to say this stuff. Instagram and Twitter.
Instagram.
Yeah. And I'm at Blevins Sean on Twitter, at Sean2D2 on Instagram, but Yeah, most importantly, follow our official one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And please leave some reviews on stuff because we
We get a lot of good YouTube comments.
Yeah.
So we had this on iTunes and all these other podcast sites, and we also put the video up on YouTube, and YouTube seems to have the most traffic on comments and stuff. And thanks for that too, because we always try to respond to them. And
But I guess too, like talking about 5-star reviews, that is very nice because it also kind of gives it to a larger audience, right? Like
Well,
the
too,
more of
like
those
on,
you get,
on
the more it
iTunes
puts
to
out.
climb the charts, like you need to have a combination of downloads and reviews and positive feedback.
Yeah, so positive
that-
feedback really helps us, and
Yeah, we
helps
don't-
us get
we're-
more followers.
We don't want to astroturf and have people do it on our behalf, or friends who don't listen to
Yeah,
anything.
we want people to actually listen, to get out there and give us positive reviews and make fun of William.
Yeah,
And
so that will
pants has
bring.
got to go. That was one comment William got. You can dig through our YouTube videos to find that one.
Yeah.
Oh, and just as an off reference, this is like the first time in like 4 podcasts I've not worn an X-Men shirt to some degree, I think. So I'm not a Marvel
Nerd.
fanboy. I just obviously have a bunch of those shirts.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, okay. I do hate Avengers too, though. So I got that going for me.
All right. So that'll bring this episode of the House by Video Store podcast to a close. Thanks for listening.